Yes, I have papers.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual release of Some Collages, a new book by Jim Jarmusch. My name is Casey. I'm with Anthology Editions. We're an independent book publisher based in Brooklyn, New York. Tonight, we're live from James Fuentes Gallery, where Jim's show Newsprint Collages is on view until the end of October. We're joined by Randy Kennedy, who wrote a brilliant introduction for the book. Randy is a writer and curator for the New York Times and for the New York Times Magazine. He's written about many of the most prominent artists in the last 50 years, including John Chamberlain, Klaus Oldenburg, and Kerry James Marshall. His first novel, Presidio, was published by Simon & Schuster in 2018, and he's currently the director of special projects at Hauser & Wirth. Jim Jarmusch is a film director, writer, musician, producer, and artist, a prominent figure in independent cinema. His notable films include Stranger Than Paradise, Down by Law, Dead Man, Broken Flowers, and Only Lovers Left Alive. Some Collages is his first book of collage artwork. After the talk, we'll open up the floor for questions. If you're tuning in tonight, feel free to ask your questions in the comments section, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. You'll find a link to purchase the book at the bottom of your screen. If you're based here in New York, the gallery does have signed copies available. I'd like to thank James Fuentes Gallery for this event and the partnership. And without further ado, yes, absolutely. Thanks.
All right, let me just
Thank you.
get this going. Thank you. Wait, who's here? All right, are we audible? Well, I just want to say I'm extremely happy to get the chance to do this, and I think that Jim is one of those people of whom, it's rightly said that he doesn't need any introduction, especially in this city, and certainly in this neighborhood, the Lower East Side, which is the crucible where you were formed. Jim's movies have been a really big deal for me. The first movie poster I ever had on my bedroom wall was for The Empire Strikes Back, which is not one of your movies. But the second poster I had...
Empire Strikes Back too, which was mine.
The second poster I had on my bedroom wall, not that many years later here in New York, was for Stranger Than Paradise, which is still one of my favorite movies, and it's a great poster. And the first movie that I saw with my future wife, the first movie we ever saw together in a theater was Night on Earth here, I think at the Angelica, and I still remember it very clearly, and I remember how sophisticated I felt that was our first movie that we got to watch together.
Well, I did apologize to your wife, so I'm sorry about all of that.
And then I also want to say that when I wrote a novel a few years ago, and I think there's certain registers of like space and solitude and silence in that book, which is about a wandering car thief in West Texas, that I imbibed from your movies, along with a kind of a hangdog humor. Anyway, it's great to talk. And so what we're talking about tonight is yet another one of the things that you've done, along with writing poetry and making music for a long time. But you've also, on the sly for about 20 years, without telling us, have been a secret collagiste. And we're surrounded here by these. So one thing that I just wanted to, you've been taking a lot of questions in different forums about this stuff, so I don't want to wear you out by asking you the same questions, but do you remember the first one of these that you made? And were they always with newsprint, or did you start out with more elaborate materials and then pare down?
No, they were always with newsprint, and I don't remember, but the first one was maybe 20 years ago. So it was a long time ago. And I liked found materials for the backing as well. And then they were always things out of newsprint, very minimal collaging. But I want to just go back because I wanted to tell the story. Randy's talking about his book, which I love, Presidio, which is a brilliant book. And I just love that book. It's kind of crime fiction, but not exactly. I don't even want to like try to categorize it.
It's lousy criminals who aren't good at it.
Yes, kind of failed criminals.
Yeah.
But it's such a beautifully written book, and I love your style. So maybe 2 years ago, I had just finished Presidio, and I was all excited, and I talked to Lucy Sant about it. And then I was out in the East Village, and I was in a bar in the East Village, and I saw my longtime friend Carla McCormick, and he was at the end of the bar looking at images of some kind of artworks with another guy on his phone, and they were discussing them. And I kind of came in, and Carlo, and I kind of interrupted, and then I said, man, I read this book, Presidio, this guy, Randy Kennedy, wrote this book, incredible. I was so excited. And then Carlo says, well, this is Randy Kennedy. And I was like, what? And he was right there. They were talking, so it's kind of great, So I was a little like taken aback by meeting someone whose work like had moved me so much.
Well, thanks.
It's a great book. Anyone interested in any kind of novels that are character studies with a criminal undercurrent that have a darkness to them, that the details of things are just so beautiful in the book, and nothing's overwritten. And anyway, great book. So
thank you.
And then Randy wrote he wrote an essay introducing the collages in this book. So I'm honored to be here with you.
Same here in spades. Do you remember who were? You've talked about the importance of like Jasper Johns, for example, but who were collage makers who you paid attention to early on growing up?
As a teenager, still it's huge impact on my world as a teenager in the outskirts of Akron, Ohio, was the Dadaists and the Surrealists. And when I first discovered them, my mind was blown and remains blown. So certainly there was Max Ernst and then Picabia and even, they were mixing things. And of course, the Picasso and Braque before them were using collaged materials as well, mixing things. But really generally the idea of surrealism and Dadaism, and surrealism still being, for me, also an important literary form, but the visual forms of it were super important to me. So that's sort of the first, I got the idea that, wow, you can mix all these things together. And the idea of finding extraordinary things in the ordinary, and the surrealist pursuit of, what is consciousness and dreams and subconsciousness, and how do they weave together in your perception of everything. That was sort of, it set me off on a certain course for my whole life in a way. And, my collages have some reference to surrealism in the most minimal form of rearranging visual information like that, just altering it so that it's more dreamlike consciousness than, hyper-realistic kind of world. And for me, the collages still are like little dream worlds for me. Even while I'm making them, I kind of feel like I'm dreaming, and I like to be alone and almost not in a trance, but I try not to be thinking about them. I try not to have my analytical mind, which isn't my strength. I try to have it turned off so I'm not analyzing the juxtapositions of the things. That's a long-winded answer that had nothing to do with the question.
I read something from a long time ago where you were talking about the process of editing a film, and you said, I think of myself as the navigator of the ship, but not as the captain. Because the way that you think of what you do is necessarily like highly collaborative. But
Yes.
Is there something about getting to do these, because they're so simple and you do them by yourself, where you feel like you are the captain of the ship? Or is it still a process of like not quite consciously being in control of what you're doing?
Well, the metaphor doesn't quite hold up, because when you make a film, you have a crew and a group, and you are like, my films, it's like a bunch of pirates on a ship or a biker gang or something, but we're very close and we're working together to make something, and we all have different jobs and they're all invaluable in terms of making the film. So in that sense, I'm sort of the navigator. But the collages, there's no crew, there's really no ship.
Yeah.
I'm just floating away.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different,
And do you tend to be, are you a night person, or do you come at, when do you sequester yourself to make these?
Yeah, I'm a night person since my teenage years. I can't seem to stop.
Same here.
The only time I get up early is when we're shooting films. You have to get up at 5 or 6, and then I'm excited to do so.
Yeah.
Because I get to do the thing, I can't believe that I get to make a film each time. So I get excited, but as soon as I'm done again, I revert back to my nighttime schedule. Because it's quiet. I used to love it because in New York City, I don't really like all the shit that's going on, and before noon. It's like confusing to me. It's too much energy.
Right.
So I figure, well, if no one reaches me till afternoon, then I've missed half of that day, So I only have to put in half of the, the working world day in a way.
Yeah.
And then my work starts usually after all of that in a way. So.
I was going to say, for like people who are watching this online, that
we're really tiny, probably.
Yeah, we're probably
Look at this giant
Can
water.
you hear us?
These are the small bottles too. So,
There's problems of scale. Well, that it should probably be pointed out that the main mechanism for all of these is essentially either excise ahead or swap ahead, right? I mean, I don't think there maybe sometimes bodies get swapped, but typically it's either the head is removed,
yes,
or the head is swapped.
So far, it's pretty much just reordering what head goes with what body,
Yeah.
And, it can be like, I try to avoid things that are overtly, I mean, you can do something political. It's very easy to put Donald Trump's head on a dog or something like that. And then I've made a statement. I try very much to not do that kind of thing or make them too cute. And of course, as Godard said, everything is political. Politics enter everything.
Right.
Which of course they do, and I'm culling things from newsprint. So obviously there's a lot of political kind of references or let's say undercurrents, but I try not to make them obvious or predominant, or I try not even to think about them. But I have to say, one thing I learned from my collages that's really interesting to me is that I am not concerned with gender. So I don't consciously flip genders. I just find the things that appeal to me by size and color and background and the heads. And I found, because I'm of a certain age where this whole binary sexuality is ingrained in what I've been taught or how part of me thinks. And I realized, wow, when I'm making the collages, I'm not, that means nothing to me, So I'm kind of proud of that. It's more like younger people now, they don't care about that stuff. It hasn't been beaten into them in that way. And I'm free of it when I'm in my little world.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of proud of that, but I didn't realize it until having made like 300 of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you're often putting a male head, female body. You don't seem to care about it.
Yeah.
But you're obviously not trying to make it a statement either. So it sort of just really is kind of fluid in the creating of them, to use that word. I'm sort of proud of that. It's not conscious really, which is why I think I'm proud of it, you know?
Yeah. There's this thing that I think William Eggleston said one time where he talked about how he said, you know, there's something about pictures and words. And for me, Eggleston said, you know, the two things just don't, he says, I can't explain to you why I take a picture or what it means. It's just that there's no way that I can put it into words. And so if you were pressed on some of these, like, why did you choose those snowmen and take all their heads off and crop it the way you cropped it, would you be able to articulate it, or it
No.
gets to a point where it's just
No, I
becomes-
couldn't articulate it. You know, it's more like just aesthetic inclinations. And if I try to articulate, I'm not very articulate about any of the things I do, like making films. I find it really strange to, when people ask me after I've made a film, like to talk about what it means, you know? I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, you know, I always like, I like to think of like sometimes when Bob Dylan has been asked about the meaning of the songs, he gets very irate. Like, that's not my fucking job.
Yeah,
I don't have to explain it to you. I made the fucking song,
Right.
you know?
that was
And I don't feel irate about it. I just feel sort of confounded by the question.
yeah,
Also, when you make a film, you put so much energy into it for several years that by the time it's completed and, you know, you're plugging it into the socket, meaning the audience is receiving it, which before it doesn't really matter until you have that circuit, you know, then I'm a different person. You know, that was 2 years ago or whatever when I wrote the thing 2.5 years ago. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
different now. And that's for that reason too, that once I make a film and it's been put out to the audience, I never look at them again. I have no interest. I don't.
you
wanna
have
see-
never.
No. And even when I've had to say, transfer them to a different, you know, digital format or do something like that, I always do, in the old days, I'd say, okay, just show it to me out of order when they were still reels, and I'll address the color correction on each reel. But I don't want to see it as a story, as a thing anymore.
Yeah,
And so even now, it's like, well, take the sound off if I'm working on the image. And you just don't. If they're like your kids, then you gave them everything you can, and then you send them out into the world. Good luck to you.
right,
I can't help you anymore.
right. And do
Not
you,
that that's the best way to treat your
and
kids.
do,
Sometimes they need that, you know.
and do you think that that going back would mess you up in terms of?
Well, you can't change it.
You can't change it.
You can't change
Well, I
it,
guess
so
you could,
why
right?
bother?
But-
And of course,
yeah.
nothing's perfect. And I've used this quote a lot of Paul Valery, said a poem is never finished, only abandoned.
Right.
And you could edit a film forever and ever.
Right.
You know, the possibilities are endless. So you have to abandon it.
Yeah.
And I take that to heart. Thank you, Paul Valery, because I abandoned them.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to really deal with them anymore, like looking at them. So.
Right. There was this thing John Chamberlain, the sculptor John Chamberlain, said, you know, who was this kind of gruff guy, and he said, people are always asking me what is, you know, because he made, as you know, sculptures that were often made from crushed parts of cars, these abstract expressionist kind of three-dimensional things. And he said, God damn it, everybody's always asking me, what does it mean, jelly bean? And he's like, I don't know. And even if I did know, it would only be what I thought it meant. Meaning, he might be the last person you should ask.
Well, that's right. And anybody's opinion, in a way, is more valuable than the creator of it, because they're receiving it. So I've often had people tell me things about my films that I wasn't aware of. And after they told me, I see them in the film, and I see, oh yeah, it is about that. Oh yeah, there is that connection there. But I wasn't conscious of it before. But that happens with everything. Like I had a lovely thing because Julian Schnabel came by, and there's one little collage of a little white snowman head on a kind of lonely guy sitting alone, right? And Julian said, I love that one. It's a self-portrait. I really like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And then I looked at it again today when I came in. It is kind of,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said that, but.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's connected to a degree, is before you started making movies, you were preparing to be a poet, and you went to school and you studied under.
I'm still preparing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's a long preparation.
But you studied with was David Shapiro, right, and
Yes.
Kenneth Koch, who's a fellow Ohioan,
Yes.
right?
Well,
and,
Cincinnati. He's a Southerner.
Oh,
but anyway.
right. Do you think of collage as being, I mean, to me, sometimes it feels like it's the closest genre of art to poetry, because you're doing, often it is just it's this, you can do it anywhere. It's like, it's this ethereal material. You have these very discrete elements that you can put together. So does it feel of a piece to you with the poetry that you write?
Definitely.
And are there
related.
any ones that you think of in context to poetry that you write?
No, I love poetry always because of its abstraction and, what's left out in a way. And even the spaces on the page. When I first saw Apollinaire's poems, that calligram, and even the lettering on the page was something he was playing with. And I love poetry by what it doesn't have to say. I hate a lot of poetry, I must say.
Yeah.
But I'm a real, there's so much that I really love. So I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm not going to mention poets I hate, but
Yeah.
but there is a relation. But for me, the relation goes even further, because everything I make, and I sort of realized this by the collaging, the collages, is that I tend to gather elements that I will then assemble. And it's very true of filmmaking, because even while you're shooting, you're just gathering what you're going to edit from. In my case, there are formulaic ways to make films that are very strong. Alfred Hitchcock, storyboarding. I don't do that. I don't use storyboards. I don't do any of that. I try to stay open, and I'm gathering. I have a script, but shooting is gathering the things in the editing room. That's where you make the film. That's where you put the things together. Even the script, though, I collect all these disparate ideas before I even write it. And then they sort of tell me what I'm going to make out of them. So that's very, so these collages are the most reduced way, the most reduced example of that procedure. The poems I've been writing for the last few years, or year or so, I start with the titles. So I have a book of titles, and slowly I'm writing poems to go with each title. So. And that's a kind of, Kenneth Koch strategy for sure.
Right.
And the playfulness of the New York School and David Shapiro, what a gift to have known these people. And I got to thank two of my friends, Lucy Sant, who's the first person I met when I came to New York and
One of my favorite writers.
One of my favorite writers
of all time.
And people. And that was one, so she's one of my oldest friends. And Phil Klein, who was my oldest friend from Ohio, was at Columbia. And they were both really interested in Frank O'Hara and John Ashbery and Kenneth Koch when I arrived here, and David Shapiro. And they kind of guided me, like, you gotta study, you can study with these guys, So they're very important to me too, as my contemporaries.
Which one, in some recent interview you talked about, was it Koch who gave you a poem and said, bring it back to me in 3 days, translated into German, and you said...
No, he gave me a poem by Rilke, and said...
Who did? Koch did?
Koch did,
yeah.
Kenneth Koch, and said, bring your translation back in 2 days or 3 days.
Oh.
And I said, Kenneth, I don't know any German whatsoever. And he just looked at me and said, exactly.
Right.
And sent me off. And that was a huge thing for me that has always stuck with me, of making things out of something else and transforming them. And obviously, appropriation is something, I got an appreciation for appropriation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Always, in all forms, it's 20th century art, you know,
Yeah.
appropriation is a very beautiful thing to me.
Yeah. There was, the novelist Donald Barthelme said one time, he's like, the only thing that you really need for genius now is a bottle of rubber cement. Because he's, and his method of writing short stories and novels, highly postmodern was a lot of cut and paste. And
I like that John Lennon said something, I'll misquote it, but I love something about originality comes from the inability to imitate your inspirations. You can't quite imitate, so it takes, something else comes out of you. And that's sort of like Kenneth Coates saying, we'll find something in the Rilke. He gave me no instruction.
Yeah.
But it was like, well, do I take the Rilke poems in 2 stanzas of 4 lines? Or do I try to find Latin roots or sounds of words that trigger an English word? Or
right.
What the hell do I do?
Yeah.
You know? And it was a very important thing for me.
And translating poetry is incredibly tough.
Well, that's
and
where
I bet Rilke was, not an easy assignment.
No, and such a beautiful poet, But I had a line in a film we made, Patterson, where a character, a Japanese poet in the film says, poetry in translation is like taking a shower with a raincoat on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Kenneth Cope once said to us, or David Shapiro, one of them said, poetry in translation is like taking a bath with your clothes on. Which I thought both of those were it's kind of appropriate.
Right.
It doesn't quite work, right?
Right. You sort of have, in a way of thinking about this technique, there's almost like an actual lineage, because you knew William Burroughs. Yes. You did, what was it, sound for the Howard Brookner film about Burroughs, and the other night you told me some, fine vintage Burroughs stories. But
we spent a lot of time with Wild Bill, and I really, this amazing person, and the people we got to meet through him.
Yeah.
Brian Geisen, of course, John Giorno, and all these amazing people.
Right.
Allen Ginsberg, obviously, but Burroughs is very important for me in reorganizing. See, I have these 2 kind of halves of Burroughs and some of the beats, so-called beats, which are contemporaneous with the New York school, but very different at the same time. But they're both in me, Burroughs is very important to me for not trusting things and saying language is a virus and talking about the manipulation of everything and being suspicious of it. And then also the beautiful things that he and Geisen did by cutting up and rearranging things. And that
which really was sort of Geisen's,
what an amazing guy.
A gift that sort of Geisen, in a way, gave to Burroughs, which Burroughs sort of ran with.
Yes.
It seems like.
But Howard Brookner made this film called Burroughs in the late 70s. A lot of it was just the 2 of us, a 2-man crew. Mostly I did sound and Howard would shoot it. Occasionally he'd give me the camera and say, you shoot, it's too heavy right now. Or, I'll record the sound. And we spent a lot of time with Burroughs. It was very interesting, and I got to sit with him a few times. We weren't working. While he was working on his scrapbooks, his kind of collage.
I was about to ask if you'd watched him actually make visual
and
artwork.
talked to him about them, and actually watched him constructing them, so I could kind of watch how his mind would find a juxtaposition that wasn't apparent, to any kind of conscious analytic mind.
Yeah.
It was like, the third mind, as they say. And
were substances sometimes involved in that making, or?
Mostly.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Right.
Delivered by, the subject of the film often, so.
Right. Right.
But, drugs and guns were always around,
Yeah. And you were spending time with him here in New York over on the Bowery, but then also out somewhere like in Kansas or?
In Kansas, but in Colorado, because there was the Naropa Institute connection, but Burroughs was obsessed with ghost towns in Colorado, up in the mountains. So Colorado. So we went there. We stayed there for quite a while and filmed him in ghost towns. And it would involve us getting up very early to go out and shoot guns off at bottles and stuff too, because William loved doing that. You know, it's his favorite thing. So yeah, it was really interesting to be around that kind of a mind, for sure.
And you were how old when this was happening? You were like in
my 20s to 23, something like that, I guess.
And where you told me a story the other night about him shooting into his orgone box. Was that here?
That was on the Bowery in the bunker, yes. He had an Wilhelm Reich lead-lined orgone box, and we had been up hanging out, Howard and I, all night with him once, and he was feeding us. I don't know if I should tell all of this stuff, but anyway, he did some wild things. But at the end of the night, and we had been there all night hanging out, and it was getting a little wild. It was just the three of us, but the behavior on Burroughs' part was becoming a little concerning. So I thought I was going to extricate myself at this point, but I'd been there for 10 hours, right?
Yeah.
So I went outside on the Bowery, having really no idea what time it was.
Well, and people should know, I mean, the bunker in this building over on the Bowery there's no window. It's like being in a boiler room.
Yeah, it was a YMCA and where Burroughs lived. So anyway, I hit the street and it was like 7 a.m. with bright light and all these guys working, moving refrigerators and cash registers and all this stuff and trucks. And this is 1979 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it was very strange experience. Thinking it was still nighttime and then going out and finding the world like so active and alive.
Yeah. When you first started making these, did you think that you would, it's always a strange question, because usually when somebody makes something like this, even if they think this is just for me and I'm never going to show the world, there's always, I mean, like keeping a diary or something, there's some subliminal need to show the world at some point or hope the world finds it. But when you were making these to begin with, did you ever think you wanted people to see them other than your friends and family? No,
I didn't think about it. I used to send them little ones in letters to friends sometimes, just stick one in for fun. That was about it, and I really didn't think too much about them, And then a few years ago, Arielle de Saint-Phal, who's helped me organize this book and organize my collages, was, she was curating some shows and asked to have a few of the collages in. And so that was the first time anyone saw them. And then also she helped me really sort of design the book and lay the book out and help me with all of this, with the show and everything. So I needed a little push in a way that I'm so happy, I'm very proud to collaborate with her on all of that. But, no, I wasn't intending to really, I had no idea. But I was getting a lot of them. I had almost 500 or something. So, starting to take up room in the drawer.
And have you made them during downtime when you're making a movie, or they tend to come between the effort of making and writing?
I don't do anything else usually while shooting a film because I have so little time to sleep or anything. And you only get the chance once to do each scene in a film, really, for me, But I'll do them during certainly post-production, pre-production. I do them when I'm traveling. I do them in hotel rooms. I can do them anywhere where I'm not in a moving vehicle.
Yeah.
So I can do them pretty much anywhere. I did quite a few in my mother's house in Cleveland the last few years of her life when I'd go stay with her. Not very frequently, but I would go, fairly frequently, and I would be alone at night upstairs and listening for her, and I made a lot of them there as well. and I make them now. In my place upstate, I have my dream has come true after all these years. I have half of a garage. I have the size of one car bay in a garage. I've converted into my recording studio and my little art room. So I make a lot of them there. I love making them there. I love making music there too, and writing poems and stuff. So.
And over the years, have you done any other? I mean, like, have you ever picked up a paintbrush? Or do you make other visual art that's not a newsprint collage?
No,
or want to?
I used to draw a lot of sort of cartoon-like things and even little comic strip things only for friends. But otherwise, no. A lot of, cameras are important to me, so I have thousands of photographs.
Yeah.
So I've taken a lot of photographs in my life. And then these are obviously photographic on some level, but nothing, no painting, stuff like that I haven't really done.
When you think about these and there's that thing of that modernist or postmodernist thing of variety and repetition. And they do make me think of somebody that I know that we are both fanatics about, which is Joe Brainerd, the writer Joe Brainerd. And,
yes.
One of his greatest works is the memoir called I Remember, which is just what it says. It's a memoir in the form of short declarative sentences that start with the words, I remember an event or a memory or a feeling or from his childhood and up through New York.
One of the real masterworks of 20th century writing and New York school too,
Yeah, but putting these really, really defined straits on what he was going to do. And that sort of seems like what you're doing here, giving yourself just, a really pretty strict set of rules and then figuring out where you can go with that.
And Joe Brainerd made collages. I own a Joe Brainerd that I deeply love that is a Terryton cigarette butt. He smoked Terrytons. And then then he painted, it's on a black background. He put the cigarette butt and then painted the smoke. And it's framed and it is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's one of my favorite things I have by any artist,
Yeah.
But yeah, Joe Brainerd, yeah, amazing.
And then I don't know if I'm getting this right, but then in your film, Patterson, the poetry that the main character writes is by Ron Padgett, who was Joe's childhood friend, I believe, right? From Tulsa.
Very close, yeah,
very,
almost like brothers, those two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I love Ron Padgett. He's just one of my favorite poets and people. I just love that guy.
Yeah.
He has a new little book that I think there are only 250 printed. The title of the book is So Say So.
So Say So.
So Say So.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful little book. And none of the poems have titles, but I just love his poems, Unfortunately for him, the first time I ever met Ron Padgett years ago, I was so excited to meet him that I just started spouting out quotes from his poems,
Yeah.
And he was surprised and slightly annoyed, but also sort of gratified at the same time.
Yeah.
So I was quoting full poems of him to him because he's one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. I'll take just.
who could write a poem? Sorry, called "Firemen Chop Their Way Through Shed."
Right.
Ron Padgett is just a genius.
Yeah, he's amazing. I'll take a detour just for a second into that film. And I'd mentioned this to you the other night, but I rewatched it, and I noticed this thing that I guess I would call a MacGuffin if you can properly speak of MacGuffins being in Jim Jarmusch films. But I'm watching it, and I keep seeing this book that I actually brought. That's this book. And it shows up just very surreptitiously, I think maybe it's on a bedside table, and then maybe it's on the main character's desk at some point.
Yeah, it moves around a little bit.
Yeah, and you can see it because this particular edition of it, has this very striking cover. But this is by the Swiss writer Robert Walser. It's called The Walk, and it's this beautiful explication of a day, and I guess a morning into an afternoon into an evening walk.
It is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and I've read it only in English. It's from what, 1917? When did he write it?
Yeah.
It is the most beautiful book, and it's so meta too, in that it's called The Walk, and the story describes a walk. And so the walk is the story and the thing that he's doing. And he refers to it even. I mean, it's so incredible. At one point he's walking along and he's passing a factory, and there are guys he knows that work there. And he's talking about, my friends, some of my friends are in there. And I'm paraphrasing probably very badly, and I haven't read it for a while, but he's saying, wow, they're working so hard. And then he starts feeling guilty, saying, I'm not working while they're working. I'm just walking out in the sunlight. And then he flips and says, wait a minute, this is my job. My walk, I'm a writer,
right?
And my walk is the thing I'm writing.
Exactly.
So I am working, so fuck them, but they're not even involved in this. And a guy passes on a bicycle and he's thinking, that guy probably works in the factory and he thinks I'm an asshole.
Right.
But he doesn't write in this language. It's beautifully written.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, if Franz Kafka were bipolar, going up and down, because he becomes ecstatic at things and then very annoyed by other things.
Yeah.
He passes a butcher shop at one point, and the butcher sign is red and gold, and he becomes incensed by this.
Right.
Like the gold. Like, why? What right does he have to display this gold color? But it's it's just one of my favorite books ever.
Yeah, and then he ended his life in an asylum.
Also, he died taking a walk.
Right.
And he fell in the snow. And died. And his friend was with him, a photographer.
And I remember seeing that picture and thinking, once I got to know Walser, saw that picture and I thought, this is not a real picture. This was staged, or somebody did this after the fact. But it's his real body in the snow with this overcoat on, and the hat, if I remember correctly, the little bowler hat, just, there, and he's just lying calmly and perfectly in the snow where he went down.
Perfect death for him.
Yeah.
But toward the end, Robert Walser was writing microtexts on business cards. And in order, they had to use microscopes kind of to...
And they thought, I think, for a long time that they were nonsensical, that there wasn't a key to them, and then figured out, no, he was really writing. He continued to write. Although I remember at one point he said to somebody, to an interviewer, he said, I did not come to this hospital to be a writer. I came here to be mad. But of course...
Yeah, let's just clarify.
But but of course he did...
I had the great, gift of being friends with Robert Frank, and Robert Frank also, he was born in Switzerland.
Yeah, two Swiss.
Robert Walser so much.
So what business did this book have being, why did this book come into the movie? Just a little bit.
There are a lot of books seen in the movie on his shelves, which I don't want to see the film again because I probably want to redo them.
Yeah.
Things I left out or whatever. But I don't know, it's just such an important book to me that it creeped its way into the film. It's not my fault.
It's not your fault.
Robert Walser did it.
Right. It was funny because I had read this edition of it maybe a couple of years before, and I had it out, and so I kept thinking, oh, it's an opposite. That's not really that book. It's just something that's got these little red squares on it, and then I would pause the television and look, and I'd be like, that's that book.
I love that book so much.
Yeah. All right, I'm told that we should take some questions.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions coming in. The first is, Jim, music has always been an integral part of your filmmaking process, and you said that it sparks creativity for you. Is this the same when you're making collages and writing poetry?
And I'll repeat the question because it's a little hard to hear in here, but that music has always been a catalyst or a stimulus for you in other realms of creativity, and are these the same way, that they jumpstart you in other areas?
Gee, I don't know. It sounds like too analytical for me to answer. I mean, I listen to music usually while making these. I don't while writing poems, though, because I find the music distracting, and it takes me somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to answer that. If they're related somehow. And I love music. I love the spaces in music, and the pauses, the dynamic elements of music is so important to me. I love variation in all forms, and especially in music. I love the idea of variations. I used to think, I love Bach because of his variations of melodies. And some years ago, I had the idea that, Bach had how many children? Like 12 children or something. And he was always moving around to be the organist at another place. And he was commissioned to write music all the time, write more. And I thought, I bet he started using variations because what am I going to do? I can't come up with more shit. I got to feed these kids. I got to write something. I'll just use a variation of that thing.
Right.
And then he started doing that, and I'm probably just imagining this.
Yeah.
But what a beautiful thing, the idea of variations.
Right.
In all forms, in art, and, well, look at, I remember, Joe Brainerd,
Right.
the idea of repetition and variation, they're really things I deeply love, and I appreciate them. Like you mentioned Jasper Johns and talk about variation. I mean, he's the master of variations.
Yeah.
He'll make 50 paintings of
Right.
numbers, or his targets, or his flags, or
Right.
or his device paintings that I love so much.
Right.
And Warhol, of course, certainly.
Yeah.
Continually
The repetition
making,
and the
yeah.
variation. Wait, there's a question in the room.
Can you talk a little bit about your process? Because do you do these while you're reading the news? Like, do you pull a picture and then make a collage, or do you have like a pile or a filing system where you cut them all and refer back to them? They stay with you somehow and know what you're looking for?
Well, sometimes they're immediate, and I right away I'm pillaging things from the paper, and then I'm seeing occasionally right away I have to make the collage. But normally, no, I'm gathering elements. So I have this incredible flat drawer metal filing cabinet that I got at some estate garage sale or something some years ago. And each drawer is like 3.5 inches. I love this thing, and it's tall. So I have a lot. I take pieces of cardboard, different papers I like, just background paper. I'm gathering these things, and then I have envelopes full of heads. I have files of background photographs that I'd like to appropriate or change. Mm-hmm. So I'm collecting them, and then sometimes I just sit, and in the way that I open my notebook and I want to write a poem. So I look through the titles that I have, right? And some of them are very short, like, let's see, this is Hedge. And I have to write a poem called Hedge, And then, so I'll do that with this. I'll just find a background, and then I need to find the right heads for this. So it's sort of sifting through and seeing what. But again, I try not to be thinking too much or analyzing it. But I gather materials,
It struck me today too that because there's this big article in the New York Times that reprints several of the collages on a whole broadsheet page.
And a big giant picture of me that's sort of embarrassing.
But it struck me that you might be presented with a sort of a conceptual quandary, which is you could make a collage now out of one of your own collages.
Well, I was a little disappointed because online they did a little, they put a bunch of little photographs from the same photo shoot together.
Yeah.
And I was hoping they would reprint that so I could pillage the heads.
Yeah.
But instead it's a big giant one.
Pillage your own head.
Yeah.
Right. But you could also pillage a collage.
I could.
Yeah.
That's getting a little conceptual there, Randy.
Right.
You're confusing me.
Sorry.
You're going too far for my brain to handle. I'm starting to short out.
All right.
Possibly, I don't know. I'm not sure. What I'm into now is like my new series have different backgrounds of kind of messed up cardboard and stuff.
Yeah.
There used to be a guy, long time he's gone now. There was a very narrow hardware store on Elizabeth Street. And the guy that ran it was really cranky. And he did not like me. He would never help me, you know?
Right.
It's like, do you have any nails of this? I said, how would I know? Look around, I don't know. But anyway, I loved going there. It was so crowded. You know, you could barely walk in there.
Yeah.
But he would write up the receipt on your brown paper bag. And I used to love that. And I used to take those pieces of the bag and see his, you know, calculation on it, you know? 5 nails, 36 cents, or blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And you add them up, and then, okay,
Yeah.
give me this, give me $3.
Right.
So I love that. I
Right.
love the kind of,
And the cards the brown cards that you use are kind of feel like that.
yeah, and that was a whole series, you know, a lot of these 5x7 cards. I love the size, and they seem to work really well as frames for the size of the things I was, you know, scavenging.
Right.
So though a lot of them were those. The newer ones are ones that are not this size. Oh, that's a new one. I like this because it has Scotch tape on it.
Yeah. Right.
My brother, I was very impressed. My brother's a kind of amazing artist, filmmaker, photographer, and he was in a group show maybe 10 years ago, and he had Polaroids, and he just Scotch taped them on in the gallery on the wall, you know? It was so much like his work, you know, but it was so kind of beautiful. You just, no frames, I Scotch. And the tape's visible, you Scotch tape them on.
Right.
They were appropriate to his work, too, which I love.
What about the text in the newspaper? Some of the collages have heads removed entirely, and the background text is still there. Are those always are they part of the same, flat file of the full text, or what was on the page when you cut out the head?
No, it's another oblique strategy. I don't know why I follow, but it's a rule. And there are more text heads. There's only one here in the show, but there are quite a few.
The Albers one, right?
The Albers one. But the text has to be from the article from which I took the photo. I don't like to mix them around. So you'll see like a guy in a suit and his head's missing, but the face is there, but it'll be like embezzlement trial from, you know, Southern District, New York, in prison, whatever you know. And I have one of the Pope, and in the article they were talking about the Vatican's collaboration with the Third Reich at some point, and in the text it says, you know, Pope, blah, 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 and Auschwitz, blah, 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 blah. And that's
Right.
in the Pope's head. So.
Right. And do you have to do, we were talking about you careful to have ones that are not too on the nose or read politically or whatever. Are there ones where, you know, you have to do the kill your darlings thing and you go back and you're like, oh God, that's a really great collage, but it's just too, I can't use it because it's too, people are going to think it's a statement or something.
I discard or shelve them, or, you know, I don't want them. Yeah, sometimes it's just like, that's too blatant or too something, too clever, you know?
I'm just curious if the collages have any influence or might they inspire some choices you made during the filmmaking process, and how might they translate onto the screen?
I'll do an Andy Warhol and say, no.
Right.
We have also asking about who some of your favorite contemporary visual artists are. Do you have people that you're following currently?
I do, and I kind of don't want to go down that path because there's so many and so many incredible people, not just, I mean, I know so many amazing artists in my life, and I'm a big fan of graffiti art or its permutations. These are heroic people to me, and among them are my friends, some of them, you know, but There's so many. I'm afraid to even talk about that. We should mention there's a guy, Ross. What's his name that I discovered?
I only know him from the Instagram handle or
Yeah.
whatever. Secret Snow, right?
False
No,
Snow.
False Snow. That's what it is,
It's
right?
his Instagram. What is his name? Ross. Anyway, oh God, I love his work, and I only know it from Instagram. But it's really
False
beautiful
Snow.
stuff.
Yeah, and then I somehow or another.
We were talking about him,
I
and then
tracked
you located
down-
who he was, and now I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Yeah, but it is really, really good stuff.
But beautiful stuff, yeah. But there's so many. I get inspired by so many things.
Oh, Eric?
John Ashbery and Coach Steven did collages. They have an impact on
Yes, and I love the fact that Ashbery made collages, as does David Shapiro, the poet, a colleague, from the same gang, So yeah, and I love, and also Lucy Sant makes incredible collages, and is one of my favorite writers. So it's interesting, these writers, and also a kind of a child of the New York School as well.
Yeah.
So we both, those are our godfathers. But yeah, I like that. I love that Ashbery made collages too.
I had mentioned in the intro that, as a sort of a sideline, like Louis Armstrong made these incredible collages on, the inside of these reel-to-reel tape boxes.
Yeah, I didn't know that till you told me that.
Sometimes they show them out at the House Museum in Corona, Queens, but I think I read that he was in a hotel room and he didn't want to go out and socialize, and he just wanted it, so he would like light up a joint and he would just, like you do, sort of take a file folder with magazine and newspaper imagery, and his tended to have a lot of words in them, but they were all, again, like yours, they were all circumscribed because they were on these reel-to-reel tape boxes, so they were all the same size.
Oh, nice.
And he would just fill them, and then they'd be protected because he just put it back on top of the box. And I guess he was carrying these around to listen to music or record. And
they were at hand.
So they were protected, and he could take them with him.
I want to see them. I know that he was really obsessed with typewriters, with typing. Louis Armstrong, he loved to type letters, and he used to always travel with the horn case and the typewriter.
And a portable typewriter.
And while other people were out hanging out and stuff, he'd be in the kitchen of the club where they were going to play or playing, typing a lot of the times, So he'd be back there while they're cooking, and he'd be typing away, probably smoking weed. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
But Louis Armstrong, remarkable. Now I want to see these collages.
They're pretty amazing. The Paris Review several years ago did a portfolio of them. They're not just because it's him, they're really striking.
Wow.
Quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah. What a brilliant person. I think of Louis Armstrong as having liquefied music in a way, because it became microtonal and sliding around, and he reorganized the way we think about music. He really is so incredibly important.
There's one more here. Someone's asking about the
Why is it the last question? We're not even drunk yet.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We have 3 questions because I'm superstitious. Okay. First of 3. They better be good, guys.
What about the decision to transfer these images into a book? And it occurs to me that's another engagement with mass print, media. You're sending it back into the world that way. What does that feel like?
It was incredibly fun in a way to make a book, and it was very cooperative with Anthology Editions and me and Ariel. It was just during the pandemic, so we did it kind of remotely. But what was so fun was, the size of the book. I didn't want it too big, but I wanted to have a lot of stuff in it, so I wanted it to be fun. And then we worked really hard on, okay, how thick should the cover be? And at times, like Jesse and Brian from Anthology, they would send just blank books and say, well, did you like throw it around the room and check it out? Like, is it rugged and sturdy like you want, you know? And they were really cool about that. And then, you know, we had the end papers being black because you know, these are not black. So they're printed onto white, right? So that was a design choice that we really liked. And then having black and then wanting, you know, the texts in the beginning to sort of imitate the color of newspaper. And then even the typeface of what Randy, you know, what these guys wrote. So it was really fun to make the book. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of cool to make an object. And then we wanted them not to be too expensive, and, you know. So it was a really pleasant experience. I had fun doing it.
The black on the edge to a degree makes it read a little bit like a very old photo album too, which was really
it's sort
nice.
of that size too, of old photo albums, and then they used to have the little corners and you stick the photos in like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of
a collection of postcards too. Like carte de visite.
Those were kind of guidance things, you know.
Yeah. Well,
and then they even printed, because I, you know, initialed them, and then they wanted that on the book, my tag.
Right.
Lee Quinones says, "Yeah, I like your tag." You know.
Right.
Impressive.
I'm a book fetishist, and I think that book just is right on the money.
Yeah, I like the book a lot.
It's really good.
I'm teasing them a lot though at Anthology, because I'm saying, okay, get ready, guys, because the next is going to be some more collages, and the third one's even more collages, and then we do a box set in a cardboard box called, what is it going to be called? Those collage? No, I don't know. Maybe just collages, you know.
Right. All those collages.
All those collages,
right.
You know.
There you go.
They're like, well, let's see if this one sells first, Jim, you know.
Right. Sure.
What made you think that you wanted to make these like public and not just keep them for yourself?
I don't know. I just thought maybe they would amuse other people. And again, Ariel de Saint-Fault kind of gave me a little nudge saying, I think they are amusing and people would like to see them. And I'll help you if you want to deliver them out to the world.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, happily though, you know,
Right.
because I'm glad that I like the book, and I think they're fun. It's not my intention, obviously, this is my entrance into the art world, Randolph.
Right.
You know, it's not, is that your actual name?
No.
No. That's good. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I'm happy they're out there though, and I love this room, and I love this gallery, and Lee Quinones is shown here, and Sant has shown here.
That was actually the party that where I
it was after
met
Lee's
you.
show. That's right.
Yeah.
Or after the discussion. They did
there was
one,
a little, like, you know, fast food and drinks and whatever, and that's where
right.
I met you.
That's
and
right. Cool.
I had met Sarah Driver, your partner, before, because I'd written about that lost film of hers.
Yes.
So I knew her, but I'd only, you know, seen you at a distance before. So
anyway, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
But so I like this gallery, and it's in the, you know, we're in the Lower East Side, which wasn't, we need a gallery in the Lower East Side. It wasn't that. It was like this gallery, the size and the room and the other things that James Fuentes has shown, you know, just seemed really like ideal.
Right.
And we talked to different book people too, and then finding Anthology just seemed like the right thing. And again,
Partly because of the music focus of that.
Yeah,
imprint.
and just their kind of attitude was really good.
Yeah. Did you, when you shot Permanent Vacation, was any of that right around here, like on Delancey, or what? Do you remember if there was anything?
No, it was on the Bowery, and then more on the farther in what was Alphabet City, you know, more over there.
Yeah.
We shot on the Bowery, though.
Yeah.
Esther Ballant walking along, I remember, with Screaming Jay Hawkins playing. She's walking down the Bowery, and you see one of my favorite New York graffitis from ever. You see U.S. out of New York. It's a graffiti, which I like very much.
Who did that?
It was just there, you know,
Yeah.
because, you know, U.S. out of Nicaragua, and all
Right.
of that stuff.
U.S. out of New York.
U.S. out of New York.
Right. I support that sentiment still.
As do I.
Right.
Let's secede.
Let's secede. We can
We're
do it.
seceding from the Union.
Right.
I like Tom Waits once was on David Letterman. It was actually for our film Down by Law, and David Letterman said, "So Tom, you're living in New York now. You've been living here for a little while. What do you feel? What are your thoughts? What do you think about New York?" And Tom said, "Well, it's like a big ship, but the water's on fire."
Actually, ties into the last question we just got on here, that is, does New York still inspire you?
It does, certainly. I love New York. You know, this is where I chose to come, and I was drawn here by the Velvet Underground and things happening here and the artists. And then I got to meet these people and know, you know, Jonas Mekas and these poets and, you know, Andy Warhol and stuff. And like, it's just amazing to me. And it's so, but it has kind of, how can I say, it gave me so much energy in my life that as I get older, it's starting to cash the chips in a little bit. So I like living up in the woods a lot of the time. I have what I call a hillbilly hideout, you know, gangster hillbilly hideout with my own art garage. So
Right.
I'm in heaven up there, and it's very quiet, and a pickup truck goes by once every 15, 20 minutes.
And you shake your fist at it.
Get off of my land.
Right.
I'm trying to watch TV. And no, I don't. It's very, this is really great up there. And I love, you know, I love plants and trees and wild animals, and I'm an amateur mycologist, mushroom identification and all those things. I'm learning to identify mosses and different ferns and all of this, again, variations, just really, interest me. I just find it so beautiful. And in nature, there's so much variation. And, you know, when you find like the Fibonacci code and the shape of a pine cone and all, you know, like it's just incredible stuff. So that's very, I love that stuff. So.
Was it Frank O'Hara wrote, he said, "I can't even enjoy a blade of grass unless I know there's a subway handy."
Yes,
but you're starting to get away from that.
I used to feel that way very much. I remember there was a period of several years where I realized I had not left the island of Manhattan, and I don't know if I'd even been, maybe I'd been north of 14th Street, but only to go to Times Square to see the crawling eyeball at 2 a.m. with an audience of drug addicts or whatever, you know.
Right.
But New York is fantastic, and in my life, I love it. You know, I love cities in general, so
yeah,
I love their personalities. But I'm very happy dividing my time and giving more of it to my place upstate. So, and I can play music as loud as I want, anytime I want. The bears don't really care.
Right.
You know,
right.
The coyotes even howl sometimes.
Yeah.
Coy wolves we have. So.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Randy.
This was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Yeah.